All else fails, we start.
Okay, let me check with this.
Let's test to make sure we have the sound.
And if not, just record. Let's go. Yeah, okay. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's as far as I can count. From Alabama. Some people count 6. Sound?
Testing for sound. Testing, testing.
Can't live with technology, can't live without it.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh,
Gina, why don't we just record?
We're live as long as our sound's okay.
yeah, okay, great. All right, so we'll just try to speak up. So it sounds like it's there, but the volume's just a little on the low side.
Okay. Thumbs up? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Town of Woodfin Town Council meeting. This is a special work session meeting to plan the budget for the next fiscal year. Today is Tuesday, May 13th, and we hope we're live with sound, but at a minimum, we'll have minutes in the recording online. First thing we need to do is approve the agenda. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Great. Consent agenda was all in your packet. It's regarding to amending our budget to handle allocations for leased vehicles and everything, including those lease detail sheets were in the packet. Any questions, or is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. New business, presentation and discussion regarding the FY 2026 budget. Sherry Powers, take it away.
Well, welcome. This will be the last of our 3 budget work sessions planned for this year. We had an alternate date scheduled in case we ran into some problematic issues and needed it, but I don't think we'll need the June 3rd work session.
Okay.
Next Tuesday at your regular council meeting, we'll present the proposed budget for your consideration. We'll also publicly set the date and time of the public hearing. That's one of the things required by statute in North Carolina. It will be at your following June regularly scheduled town council meeting. That advertisement's set to post next Tuesday, and a budget will be available for the public to review in the clerk's office beginning next Tuesday as well. A copy of the proposed budget.
Does that
All of
budget-
those things are required by statute.
Does that proposal go online or just?
We'll also put it online. Yes, sir. Good point. I should have mentioned that. So that, we'll talk in detail about all the elements of the proposed budget next Tuesday. We will revisit briefly the main parts of that presentation in June and then open up a public hearing for any of the public that would like to provide input on the budget, and you all will vote, have discussion and vote after the public hearing on the proposed budget. That'll happen June 17th. And then the last requirement in the state statute is that we adopt it before the end of June. So we'll meet all those requirements in our regular town council schedule. Any questions about that? Okay. So the proposed expansion budget, this last meeting normally centers around things that are not included in our core operating budget. We have a few things to filter out, but I put together a draft overall budget, just to give you a general idea of where I think we will end up next Tuesday. This year, this was a particularly hard budget to put together because of all the additional entries that and budget amendments we have approved for primarily Hurricane Helene storm repair and debris removal and all the FEMA money that will affect our budget. For this presentation and for the proposed budget, I've removed those elements so that I kind of struggled with the best way to present this, but it's really, if you're going to compare apples to apples, and we're supposed to present a year-over-year budget of how we have increased or decreased lines based on the previous year's activity, it's really difficult to show that in a meaningful way with all the hurricane influence. So for this presentation, I've taken that out of the budget. The information we'll provide today will be a recommended $669,623 expansion budget. This will require $208,000 in general fund balance allocation. If you'll recall, last year our fund balance request was around $1 million. We expect to make that up by the end of each year in savings and things, but it really just depends on how things fold out during the year. And hopefully we won't have another hurricane or natural disaster to contend with, but we'll keep you updated as we go throughout the year on how that lands. But today's budget, we and the projections for year end this year, that second column is also one of the more trickier projections I've had to do in my career because of all the influences of the hurricane, operations and additional expenditures. Most of that will be covered by FEMA, but there's also some unknowns that the town may end up footing the bill for. We really won't know how that's going to fold out until we get the final approvals from FEMA. We believe they're going to cover most of our costs, but I think the best example I can give you is Silverline Park. That was a pretty new completed park. We know about what it will cost we think, to complete that. FEMA's original estimate is much less than I know our bids will come back at. They tell us that if our bids come in higher than their costing, they will pay the higher price. If it was a competitively bid contract, which it will be, it's required in North Carolina and under federal law. So we'll see how that ends up. We think we will be just fine with that, but there's a lot of unknowns related to how this budget will play out. So my most important message to this council this year is to act with a sense of caution, because there are a lot of unknowns that could dramatically affect a small town with limited budget capacity. All indications are everything will be fine, but we just don't know.
How long is it likely to take before we hear something from FEMA? And is there any way to hurry that along?
Well, the tentative timeline for especially the park repairs are to have those bid out by early summer, and we expect to have contracts ready for you to approve. I think it was August is the tentative timeline that we said. Then it will have to go through approvals for probably a month or 6 weeks with FEMA. So we probably early fall before we know exactly. And I think by then we should also, that the county will likely revisit the passive rec grant and some other things that have a significant impact on those projects that were well underway when the storm hit. So it's just to kind of cross your fingers, and we're paying very close attention, and we're pursuing any revenue opportunities that come our way to help support those programs in the meantime. But like I said, there's just a lot of unknowns, and there's nothing really anybody can do about that. This is our best estimate of where we are today with the hurricane impact removed. I felt confident in removing that because the things that are in there now, debris removal, our emergency response costs are 100% reimbursed. So the net effect will really be zero on our bottom line. Okay, moving on to expansion budget details. This is a summary of the makeup of the 669,000 I mentioned in the first slide. The items in blue are things that will have a recurring impact on our general fund budget. The items in black will be one-time costs. So I wanted to call your attention to those. And then I'll go through and we'll talk about each of the items as we go through it. There are two requests that we waffled back and forth on a little bit, but presently are not included in our budget for a couple of reasons. We talked at our last meeting about the town hall reserve. In your CIP 5-year plan, we had originally included a $900,000 reserve. We thought we could have saved that amount this year towards our town hall project. But with everything that's going on with the hurricane, the 7 or 8 very large projects related to that and the parks, we just didn't think it was prudent to include that in this year's budget. We can always add it back in when we know that all the costs that will be related to the hurricane. And the second thing is the police department requested a couple of personnel related enhancements, and we decided not to include that at this time. I think we may want to go back and visit that when we've had a little more time to understand the impacts of the new pay plan that we approved last fiscal year. The chief has done a great job with recruiting and getting some of the positions filled, but depending on the experience level and seniority of the people that we hire, the cost is a little higher than we had originally projected for some of these positions. So my recommendation was to let the dust settle a little bit more on that plan before we include more payroll-related enhancements to their pay. So, property tax in the recommended budget for this year, we were recommending to leave at 33 cents per $100. This slide gives you sort of a 5-year summary of where we have been related to valuation is on the last line in black. Even with, and the mayor and I were having a brief discussion before this meeting, even with the impact of the hurricane, I've said to the council a few times that Woodfin really came out so well compared to many of our neighbors. We're showing growth instead of $1,271,000, which was the assessed valuation last year, they bumped it up to $1,314,000 is the projected assessment for the summer, which will be the taxes that we receive next fiscal year. The tax office has done a tremendous job this year in providing us updates every 2 weeks in the assessed value. Countywide, you can imagine they had so many appeals to the assessed value, primarily due to the effects of the hurricane. People that lost their homes or had significant damage or part of their property washed away and is in a creek somewhere, or things like that. Woodfin had some of that effect on the riverfront, but very little compared to the rest of the county. So even with the hurricane impact and the appeals that have been reviewed so far, we're still showing a normal amount of growth over last year. I've got one more slide related to property tax. In surveying some of our neighbors, Buncombe County, the city of Asheville, and the town of Weaverville are all projecting a tax increase for this year. So even without an increase from Woodfin, our residents will experience a tax increase because Buncombe County's taxes will be going up. So these are the rates that are proposed as of this week, and depending on how their budget votes and hearings go, that could change, but these are the rates as we understand them to today. 1 penny of sales tax today raises about $131,300 of additional revenue to the town. Any questions about taxes? Okay. Another item that we included in the expansion budget was $15,000 in repairs for Roy Pope Park. As the park ages, we discussed last month some of the repairs that Adrienne and her crew have in mind for next year, and we do have $15,000 included in the proposed budget for that. We have $176,000 for paving at Taylor Street. We had half the paving in this year's budget, but because the hurricane hit, pretty early in the year, it just wasn't in the cards to get that done this year. So we're deferring that, and we're putting the whole project in next year. And this quote's based on quote the contractor gave us a couple months ago. The sketch in the corner kind of shows the area that they're considering for paving, and then there's closer up pictures where we built the salt shed, and all that's been dirt and partially gravelled since we began using that facility. Gets a lot of wear with the big heavy trucks for sanitation and stuff in and out. So it'll be nice to have that done. In addition to that, we have 3 new police vehicles. 3 of our cars aged out this year of the lease plan. They didn't have extremely high mileage, but not extremely high. And I think the chief has elected to leave those in the fleet for now. And we will roll those out in a year or so when it just make the cost versus the benefit make sense for us to, and we'll come with a surplus resolution when it's time to do that for you all to consider. So, oops, there we go.
So also included in this year's expansion budget is a relatively small dollar item, which is a new software platform called TextMyGov. And our Communications Council Subcommittee had the opportunity to experience a demo yesterday, as did our staff earlier in the month. It's a very, in looking at the different kind of platforms that are available for community messaging, and there are a number, and our neighbors use a whole variety. There are 2 that kind of rose to the top, in my opinion. One was GoGov and the other is TextMyGov. They're very similar in what they deliver, but the added functionality of TextMyGov is that it communicates with our permitting software and potential work order platforms called iWork. So that's the system we use currently, and it's been working very well for us. And in the future, we don't have the capability to do it right now, but in the future, it would allow for citizens to also use the same platform to report things in the community. So if they see a pothole or an eroded bank or overflowing recycling cans, they can report that through this system. But it also, more importantly, especially post-Helene, will allow for the town to send community alerts. Those can be emergency-related alerts. It can also just be news and updates kind of alerts. And it walks you through let me skip over that. It walks you through a text system, registration system. So it's a very easy thing for our residents to do. And you can just scan a QR code, and I'll talk about a couple methods for registration, but the simplest way would be to scan the QR code, and it's going to prompt you with some questions, and you answer the questions, and you tell it what you're most interested in, and it registers you. So then when we're sending out messages, it'll automatically sort based on that particular user's preferences. This is showing you how to report, something that you see in the community, which is the functionality we're not ready to take advantage of, but it shows you like the kind of a question and answer process that you go through in texting. The registration system, it can, as I mentioned, you can use the QR code. And in this case, this particular sign says, do you want to report an issue? You could post something like that in your park. You can scan it and report that issue. We can use a similar QR code that we can publish on the town's website, on printed physical signs, in the newsletter. People can scan it and set up their, it's not really setting up an account, but it's informing the platform that you want to receive these alerts. There's also an option to work with the U.S. Postal Service and get a larger database of phone numbers and send a mass message, an initial sign-up message that will allow people to opt in or opt out of the system. So maybe, and it's probably going to be a broader net than Woodfin. So say you don't live in Woodfin and you get this message, you would just opt out. But if you're in Woodfin and you would like, or you're adjacent to Woodfin and you would like these messages, you can opt in and it's going to walk you through that series of questions and answers. As we mentioned, post-storm, we experienced, we had a very significant communication failure that even if we had the system in place, might have not delivered all of the messages we would have wanted initially. But it has the ability to integrate with the iPause system. So this is an integrated system that if other people, and different emergencies are going to be different. In other cases, you're going to have internet connectivity or cellular connectivity, in which case these emergency alerts that come through, say, Buncombe County, could potentially reach a particular user. The system also allows us to draw our own geographic area and say we had just concern about flash flooding on Weaverville Highway as an example. We could draw a geographic barrier around that and send a message for people in that area saying flash flooding expected, please be aware. Or whatever it is, road closures, flash flooding. But it has more capability than what we were probably even expecting. So it seemed like a very timely improvement to add to our expansion budget. And if the council approves this, then our vendor is prepared to walk us through the setup process come July 1st. So I just wanted to spend a little time because I thought this is something not just from a budget expansion perspective, but a Helene recovery perspective is something that we wanted to consider.
I would add, as part of the communications subcommittee, before we met yesterday, individually, we'd all kind of looked at emergency communications as probably the thing we needed to focus on first before we got into the more abstract planning process. And this seems to answer a lot of the questions and needs that we had already identified.
One thing that I thought was really interesting about it also is that if your example of Weaverville Highway, I'm from Greensboro, but I just happen to be getting ready to drive through that area, it will send me that alert, which I thought was an incredible, because you are driving within that zone.
Yeah, as I understand it through the iPause system, you don't actually have to be a subscriber to the platform. You would actually automatically receive that message just based on your geographic location. All right, well, we'll move on if there aren't any questions or other comments.
Next, the Silverline Park restrooms. You all have received information on this many times. That's a picture of the style that was approved by this council. Current cost. Yeah, that's right. Current cost estimates for the restroom for completion is around $426,000. It's going to require a $192,572 transfer from the general fund to completely finish the construction, and we have that included in the proposed budget in the $659,000 that we put there earlier. Any questions about the restroom? This is something we've reviewed a number of times, and slight delay because of the hurricane, and we'll have to complete the other repairs and may work on this simultaneously, but we'll just have to iron out those details. Moving into the personnel related costs, in any local municipal budget is 80 to 85% human services. So your employee, your staff, and the benefits and tax costs related to employing people in a service related industry are the largest portion of your budget, and that's true also in Woodfin. The cost of living, our personnel policy says that we use the CPIW as a guideline for the cost of living that we should offer employees each fiscal year. That's not a you must use exactly this percentage, but it's intended to be a guideline. Last December, from December 23 to December 24, that number was 2.9%, according to the CPIW, which is also the index that Social Security uses and many other government institutions. We are recommending a 3% COLA for a couple of reasons. If you look at where our neighbors landed with their proposed budgets, that seems to be about what the market is requiring for cost of living. Also, Woodfin, we were not able to fully fund COLA requirements during, if you remember, shortly after COVID, inflation was rampant and cost of living was 7 or 8 or 9, close to 9% in 2022. And we funded COLA at 6% and 4%. So we were a little behind on making our employees whole. So for that reason, we're recommending just slightly above the 2.9, a 3% number. That bottom part of the graph portion is showing where Woodfin has been over the last 4 years. And if we strictly followed the CPIW, we would be between 3 and 5% higher than we're even able to fund this year in the budget. The North Carolina League of Municipalities does a great job with their surveys each year. And as somebody who works in that area, they hound you to death until you give them your numbers. So for that reason, over 90% of the municipal governments in the state usually comply with these surveys. So I lean on them as a pretty accurate tool for gauging where we are related to salaries and benefits. They even tier their survey results based on size. So we're in the category 5,000 to 10,000 population. So we use those numbers as a guide. The average local government statewide COLA increase was 3.1%. So we're just a little bit below that. And many of the governments you'll see here offer COLA and merit increases.
What is the monetary difference between 3.1 and 3.0 for us here in Woodfin?
Well, let's look. So this slide here shows, so when we offer a COLA to employees, it's not just the salary number that will provide increase in costs. We also have to consider taxes and benefits that are based on salary numbers. So currently, if we're fully staffed, don't have any open positions for the entire year, our salary number is 2.6 million. We have another 8% in 401k that employees receive as a benefit from the town. We have 7.65% in Social Security and Medicaid FICA taxes that the town pays that for every employee. And then we are members of the state retirement plan. And those numbers in the 15 years that I've been doing this in North Carolina have gone up from 6.9% to this year they're at 14.35, and next year they're going up to 14.85, I think. Yeah. And it's a couple of points higher for law enforcement. So to answer your question, Councilmember Irvin, the 2.9% would be $99,000 will be the total cost to our budget. And it goes to $102,000 for 3%. So that's about what, $3,500, $3,400 for every 10th of a percentage. I put 4% and 5% on here just for illustrative purposes, but what we have in the recommended budget is the 3%, and that will include a total impact on the general fund budget of $102,421. Any questions? Okay. Other salary and benefit increases that are in the recommended expansion budget. The chief quickly discovered when she came to Woodfin that there was a lot of need in the evidence room and updating a lot of different things in the evidence room, and requested that our evidence technician, who was assigned half-time to the front desk and half-time to evidence under the previous chief, be returned to the police department full-time to help make up or solve some of the issues that she felt were a high priority in the police department. So we have moved the evidence technician back full-time and are requesting one half-time position. It's an unbenefited position to cover the front desk half-time. That's the only increase in positions that we'll have in the proposed budget. The cost of that's roughly $24,960 a year.
How do you staff it in the off hours? If it's a part-time position?
We have one part-time position currently,
So it'd be added.
and then the evidence technician, Stephanie, was working the other half of the day up front. So we have someone half a day now. We'll add this person to cover the second half of the day. Anytime there's an absence up front, other administrative staff, we're all assigned a day. So I'll have one day, Adrian has a day, Ricky has a day, Gina, and if anyone that is assigned the front desk is enabled, sick or vacation, then we work the desk those hours. The police department career development, their current pay plan, as I mentioned, we're still letting that settle in. There's some additional cost anticipated for that every year as the plan encourages employees to become better at their job, to study and go to school and receive degrees. They can earn extra money by receiving certifications relevant to their job. If they're an FTO, if they have investigative certifications, or a variety of other police-related training. If they get a intermediate or advanced certificate, which is something a lot of folks that are career law enforcement strive for, our pay plan provides incentive for those people to become better at what they do. So we're anticipating that people will step up in the plan and achieve some of those goals next year, and that'll have roughly a $35,000 impact on our budget. And then public works is an area that we haven't done a real salary analysis and benchmarking for a couple of years. We felt like those employees, according to the market, were a little underpaid in several areas. So we have put together a new pay plan and stepped up the public works salary slightly. And overall, for the 10 folks that work the positions that are budgeted there, we're requesting another $24,497 to add to their salary plan for next year.
Can you go back, I think, one slide? Maybe it's two. I don't know. It's okay. I know some towns, when they're discussing the cost of living, they have the increase, but they also include a merit component. And we apparently do not include that. Can you just briefly touch on that?
Sure.
So the movement in local government is to move away from merit, although some municipalities still do that. For us, we have other recognition, other monetary recognitions for our employees. So from a performance standpoint, we have our Excellence in Service program that monetarily rewards employees for great work. And that's been very successful. It's been well used by our staff, and anybody can nominate anybody for an award. We also have longevity, and that's unusual. There are not a lot of municipalities that do longevity. That's another thing that's been kind of phased out over time, and that rewards just sort of exactly what it sounds like, longevity with the organization. So there's a benefit to having people stay with one organization for a period of time, and that's how we address that and compensate them for that. Yeah. Merit is a very tricky program to administer too. So it's very difficult to get supervisors to all administer merit pay at the same level. And so I think that's part of the reason this is kind of, people have been moving away from it.
Great, thank you.
My question goes back to the same slide we were on with the 78,652, which you had not included in the budget for the police department for the shift premium and the mandatory overtime coverage. I know that we're working really hard to bring officers in here and keep them. And that's, I guess, I'm a little concerned that that's not something that we would be including at this point.
Yeah. So let me just take a moment to kind of talk about the iterative process that the staff goes through when we develop our budget. We begin, as department heads, we meet every 2 weeks. And as we approach budget season, beginning around February, March, we start to, more of that regularly occurring meeting is covering budget-related matters. And so we start with the sort of core budget amendments. And a good example of an adjustment there might be the legal fees that we would assign to the planning department. So for the last couple of years, we've had a much higher line item for legal fees related to some of the land use cases we had ongoing. This next year, we pared that way back because we don't anticipate needing that sort of outside support. Once we get through that core budget and we kind of know where we're landing on the core services, we start to look at expansion budget. And we ask every department head to submit their asks. And it's not just, I would say it's more than just the would be nice to haves kind of list. It's somewhere between nice to have and must have. And with the police department, we actually had even more items than this. But just in the priority scale, they just kind of fell lower on the list. These are the two. And we debated, Sherry and I debated whether or not we even wanted to provide this slide to council, because it's not typical for staff to share the things that didn't make it into the budget. But these were important enough that we wanted you to be aware of these cuts because they're higher priorities than just that, like I said, that kind of mid-tier priority. Particularly because of we have a very large capital project still with the park, and because we have these 6 kind of unknown public assistance projects with FEMA, we wanted to be in a more conservative position this year just because we don't know where we are going to land. If we find ourselves in an unusually positive position mid-year, these may come back before the council as our next highest priority. So if we feel like mid-year that we have the room in the budget to cover these without, any great strain, we'll ask for a budget amendment and consider adding them. And if not this year, then next year it'll come back. And this year too, I should also say, we have invested very, very significantly in our police department over the last several years. And that was important. We needed to kind of get to a more competitive position. So that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. We did underestimate the cost associated with the career ladder and the incentive plan that we implemented last year. So that is already included in the expansion budget for this year. So that was a must-have, right? We needed to cover that plan that we had already adopted. This year, we really wanted to prioritize the salary adjustments in our public works department, not only to get them up to market, but this is another area that is increasingly difficult to recruit for. And we wanted to make sure, especially given the year that we've had, that those staff members recognize the value that they give to the town. So that was our next highest priority. So it's not that these aren't very important and we don't want to fund them.
Yeah.
We're just trying to take a very conservative position right now.
Thank you.
One other thing I will add is I'm really grateful to this council for approving Prior Chief's pay plan proposal. It has allowed us to reward really experienced employees with additional pay. We recently hired a detective that came in at 1.5 times roughly what we could have paid the detective previously. And that allowed us to attract talent that is experienced and really knows what they're doing on the job and probably wouldn't have been here otherwise. So I think that the pay plan for the department overall is in a really good spot, and we can compete with anybody in this local area as far as our pay goes. It's my opinion. And not that I don't think these two requests have merit, I do. I just agree with Shannon that we have a lot of priorities this year, and we took tremendous strides in the police department's pay plan last year, and are still trying to understand the impacts fully of what that new pay plan will be on the budget. So that's details about why it wasn't in our recommendation. Any other questions about pay or COLA? Okay, so let me get back down to. Okay. One of the statutory requirements that will be included in our budget ordinance next year is our salary and pay classification plan. We made one addition to accommodate the fact that I just mentioned to the board. Our pay plan allows us to increase the base pay of very experienced employees beyond the capacity of our salary and classification plan. So we have moved senior and master police officer grades to a separate category and upgraded that from patrol officer, which was a 20, to a classification 22, which will allow us to start the base pay at a senior or master police officer up to $74,000. So that was the only change. And then we added a second, you'll see under the accounts receivable billing reception clerk, there's 2 part-time positions there instead of the 1 that we had last year. That was the only addition in personnel in this proposed budget. So you'll see this again in the budget ordinance that will be presented to the council next week. So this is the summary slide for the expansion budget. Again, all the items that we discussed total $669,623. The 2 items that we did not include, just discussed, are in green. And then how will that impact our budget? As I mentioned earlier, determining what our projected budget for year end was one of the more difficult tasks that I've had in budget projection. So don't hold me to this number. I'm fairly confident that it will be close, but there are just a lot of moving pieces in what we're doing this year. My best estimate of our ending fund balance will be $6,833,000. We have a reserve of fund balance that is required by state statute. There's a required by state statute reserve and a formula that statute requires. It also includes any unspent bond proceeds or restricted funds like Powell bill and things. So that number may change just depending on, we spent most of our GO bond money before the hurricane early this fiscal year. So most of that number's gone down from what you've seen in previous years, primarily for that reason. Estimates for unrestricted fund balance at the end of the year are $6.2 million, which is around 76%. In a normal year, without lots of other big ticket items going on, that would be a great place to be and a good number. But as I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, please be cautious in your decision making and don't think we've got lots of money to throw around, because we really don't. We have a lot of big ticket items to complete for a town this size, and we're going to have to really be prudent in our decisions in order to get there at the end of the day. Unrestricted fund balance, after including the expansion items that we discussed today, is a healthy 68.49%. And if you add in the $900 that we have reserved for the town hall project, the last 2 years, 600 this year and 300 the previous year, takes that number to an estimated 57.54%.
But we're not, the intention at this time is not to do that, correct?
Well, the previous year reserves are still on the books, but we did not put any new money in for this year.
Got it.
We may revisit that later in the year as we finish up some of the repair projects from the hurricane, and if things go very well, we may be in a position to do that. But for now, it does not include any new reserve for the town hall project.
Quick question. I don't anticipate that whatever we come up with in the communications subcommittee, that it's going to be terribly expensive. But can you just walk quickly, what is the process to amend if we do have a requirement?
Yeah, at any point, if we determine there's a budget need that has not been funded in the budget, we would bring a budget amendment towards, you guys see those about every other month, and amend the budget. So it's a fairly short process, but we'd have to formally make that amendment. Okay, and the last thing that we're going to discuss today is the fee schedule. The town's required to adopt a fee schedule every year. And there's a number of changes that we've proposed for next year that Shannon will review next.
And that's actually for fiscal year 26, not 25. So, so the fee schedule is really pretty straightforward. There's a combination of new fees, eliminating fees, or relabeling fees, so kind of shuffling things around, or updating fees. So you can see the police officer required on site, that's being removed, but it's really just because under police department, we now have off-duty police rates. So we have the regular rate, which at $55 an hour, and then the holiday rate at $82.50, and then what we call last minute, which really is anything less than 72 hours. We'll actually update that on the fee schedule to say less than 72 hours, just so there isn't that question for anybody who's looking online. This year, we also proposed to make a change and a small increase in our picnic shelter reservations. We benchmarked our reservation costs against our peers in the area, and we were a little under, and we are still under with $45 for a resident. We're proposing to split resident and non-residents, charge a little bit more for non-residents, but still a good rate. And that's for, for the first 3 hours is $75 for a non-resident. It's still a pretty good deal. Some of the other public works items we're proposing, the 265, I think, was really meant for like a pickup truck. And really what we're going to do it per item. So if you have a washing machine, a sofa, or whatever that is, we'll come and pick it up, but you have to call ahead, tell us, and pay the fee. Some of the other residential accessory structure fees, that all just kind of gets grouped under other accessory structure / retaining walls, or solar panels. Those fees have just been kind of reshuffled. And then subdivision review, again, it's just sort of a separating or teasing apart exempt subdivisions and minor subdivisions because they're very different reviews. So just making that clear that there's a different fee for those. And then we do make a distinction between temporary events on private property and temporary events on public property in our chart as well. So I think that's it. Oh, we got a few more. Sorry, stormwater utility. We went over that in one of your earlier budget work sessions. So these are the new rates, which demonstrate a reduction in our total rates in every category. And overall, we exceeded our goal of reducing rates by 15% overall. I can't remember what, I think it was 17, 18%, something like that. Do you recall? Yeah, it was more than 15%. So we felt pretty good about that. And then we are adding permit fees for flood review. We have not taken over flood review yet, but we do anticipate doing so in this fiscal year. So we want to be ready with those fees. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Under the public works, the bulky item, the white goods pickup. Johanna and I have both talked about this and both have strong feelings about not charging for these items. And the reason for that is the length of time we have lived here and the dumping that occurs, and the fact that this was instituted over 20 years ago by the town, and it has really kept the town, the fact that the town was picking up these items has really kept the area a whole lot cleaner. And our thought is, I mean, how much money does that actually bring us in a year? Is it worth going back to a situation where people, instead of calling the town and paying, are just going to start dumping again? And we just remember what it looked like
Yeah.
long ago. And
So we do have a problem, a little bit of a problem, particularly on certain properties where there's a lot of tenant turnover, where when those tenants leave, they just kind of put all of their stuff out on the curb. And that's what we're trying to discourage. So what this fee is intended to do is try to discourage that. Like, they need to proactively either, take it to the dump themselves, call us. And this would have to be combined with stronger enforcement. So we would have to follow up with the property owner and work out issue notices to say, you're responsible as the property owner. If you're the landlord, you need to address this sanitation issue. So that's what we're trying to discourage here. And we have charged in the past. We've had a charge. It was $265 per truckload is how we did it, because it was often like that giant. Well, we have plenty of people who just put out a single item.
Right.
And we didn't want to charge them $265 for that one item. So we were proposing the $50 per item as an alternative. There is a cost associated with that. We haven't tried to track it. But it is something that we feel like the property owners should be more responsible. The property and the tenants themselves should be more responsible in this. It's not to say that we still wouldn't go and pick up something if it continues to be a nuisance, or if sometimes these items, not oftentimes, but occasionally these items show up in sort of no man's land where it's not clear who the property owner is, or it's in a right of way, like a DOT right of way. And in those instances, certainly the town is still going to proactively collect that material. But it is at the council's discretion if they want to include this charge or not. But we're
will we
recommending.
have the 2 days per year where things can be put out as they were in the past, that
Yeah, we
there
could
is no
certainly do
charge?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it would just, I mean, I remember I've been here, over 35 years, and people just threw things everywhere. And it has been so much cleaner since the town was picking up those items. People were more willing to put them out at their curb, knowing they were going to be picked up. And I just think about our population here, and
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
it's just,
Would you favor 4 times a year, or is that unnecessary for the free pickup?
Might I recommend maybe we try it this year? We try to maybe push and advertise the 2 dates a year where we'll collect anything at no cost, and then do the $50 per item. And we'll report back maybe mid-year with some metrics on that, and just see how it's going. And certainly if council members notice an accumulation of debris, or not debris, sorry.
Yeah.
Accumulation of items, to certainly let us know
Use TextMyGov to report it.
when we get the work order platform set up. Yes, we could do that.
yeah, as long as we revisit it shortly, yeah. Because I don't think there'll be that much money gained from charging anyway. So, yeah, I'd like to recommend that change.
So I'm sorry, you're recommending that, do you still want to take it? You want to leave it in and we'll test it and see how it is mid-year, or do you want to go ahead and
Take it out.
take it out?
I'd like to take it out.
How do the rest of the council members feel?
I agree with that. I support it, taking it out.
So no charge, no 265, no 50.
Yeah.
So what?
And we
so
do twice a year.
But no.
Well, we
it's
don't charge, I mean,
Right.
if we,
Not
I guess we wouldn't need to push
But I think
the
that's a
twice a
good
year.
way to get things,
How much
get
would
things
that
out.
cost?
Okay, Sherry,
At one point, so if we don't have the fee in the schedule, we don't have any ability to collect for those that abuse, like the tenant that puts a whole house full of stuff that they didn't want to take with them on the curb. And that.
And we
You know,
see
I
that
think
happening all
currently
the
there are not a lot of times where we charge that $265, but it's available if they need to. I'm not sure what kind of impact that'll have on our,
Yeah. So you're
landfill
looking for
cost.
some kind of deterrent, but maybe it's $20 per item. It's just something to prevent that kind of abuse.
Yeah, I think the $20 per item maybe is the perhaps the more workable compromise, make it more affordable, but still put some responsibility on the property owner and the residents.
Yeah, so we
to
don't
not-
have that, what Sherry just described.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Me too.
Okay,
You okay with
$20
that?
change to fee.
Great.
Yeah, but some of the, and I know your worst offenders, they're not, no, that's just got to stop.
Yeah, I think we need to put some pressure on the property owners to work with their residents or to just take some
And there's a
responsibility.
couple of them that I
themselves.
know, we all know, they're just not, their dumpsters are not getting emptied on a regular basis. It is a real mess, so I hope we can try to crack down on those guys. Okay, good, all right.
All right.
What else from staff?
that's all we had for the purposes of this workshop, Mr. Mayor. If there's any other discussion or questions from the council, we'll be happy to answer any of those. That's all I have.
Great job as usual.
Yeah, thank you for the hard work
Absolutely.
preparing for this. Good.
Yeah.
Is this the last budget meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, you'll hear the proposed budget from, we'll have a presentation on that on the agenda. We'll formally set the public hearing, which will be in June. And then you all will vote on the budget at your meeting in June.
Okay, right.
So there's one last budget workshop that'll be canceled.
Yeah, we put that on there as a placeholder, so technically it is classified as a regular meeting. As you all know, if we have to call a special call meeting, the rules are very different. You can only talk about
Right.
exactly what's on the agenda. And so we always budget calendar that fourth meeting in case we need it.
Got it, okay.
Okay.
Is there anything else from council members?
Can't
No,
think of
sir.
anything.
If not, is there a motion to
Motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. I can second
I can second.
as well.
All in favor,
Favor
say
moves, aye.
say yes.
Yes,
We are
Yes.
adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you all.
You say you were.
Yeah,
you were-
thank you. Great work.
I didn't make a list.
We'll make
but
that
there
one edit
are-
on the fee and then I think we'll
Also goes
be
to
ready for next week.
like the
Okay.
Doesn't